I think that companies lose out on a lot of talent when you don't have an easy accommodation process in the application process for a candidate. If someone can't access the tools to do the job or to show how they can do the job in the interview, they're not going to be brought into the company.
Right. Welcome to the Neurodiversity in the Workplace podcast. Neurodiversity in the Workplace is a nonprofit consultancy that works with partners on their neurodiversity and neuroinclusion journeys. I'm Krista DeGuffroy. I'm a senior consultant with NITW. I've been with the team for a few months, but been in the space for a bit over a decade. Today, we are going to be talking about accommodations with Joe Riddle. Hi, Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Riddle from Neurodiversity in the Workplace, director here. Really excited to talk about the topic of accommodations. It's something that we do all the time, so yeah.
Yeah, you're right. We absolutely do it all the time. But maybe for starters, we can talk about what are accommodations. We've heard the term maybe in a more formal setting, but is that always how we approach accommodations?
Yeah, great question. So I have a couple of thoughts on just the basic definition of what an accommodation is. I think that we traditionally, when most people think, especially in the US, when most people think of an accommodation, they think this legal process that they have to go through and a bunch of paperwork that they have to fill out and a diagnosis process. Mm-hmm. That can be accurate, that's true. Yeah. But at the same time, I like to kind of simplify that definition a little bit, to look at it more as these are tools that we use to do our jobs. And we all use tools every day to do our jobs. We might use an ergonomic keyboard or a comfortable chair to sit in so that we can sit and look at a screen, right? Or we see things like screen reader technology and captioning being widely used all day throughout the world for accessibility. Originally, that was the purpose of those tools, but now people use them just to do their jobs. So I think that looking at accommodations as these tools to do your jobs can be a really helpful way to, one, destigmatize the need for accommodations, but two, encourage the usage. That being said, there still is this process that you should go through and follow to try and access those tools if you don't already have access to them.
Yeah, and I love how you broke that down because you're absolutely right. Each one of us has different ways that we best perform at work, best perform in our personal lives. And when we think about our personal lives, we don't think about them as accommodations, but we think about them as adjustments to how we do things. So I'd love to hear from you, maybe if you could tell us where you've seen accommodations go kind of like the best case, or maybe how someone might unlock those services and how we've maybe seen them with our partners.
Yeah, so I think the best case is when an organization or a company already knows what accommodations people are likely to need. This is an easy worksheet to start and to create and say, we've gotten requests for XYZ. Maybe it is one of the most common accommodations now that companies will see is a work from home request. Now, that could be a useful accommodation for a lot of people, but there's also other accommodations that can come to mind. It could be things like a screen reader technology. It could be changing the location of your desk if it's in a strange environment, right? All of these things can be accommodations. It's really any change or tool to do your job. And so that's how we like to view it. But your question, your question was surrounding what are good examples of it. If a company says, okay, we've seen X number of screen reader requests, and then someone comes and says, hey, we have a screen reader, or I would like to use a screen reader. Can I have access to this? The company makes the person fill out the applicable paperwork, but then delivers that screen reader. Simple, easy, access to a new tool that will make that person more productive, feel more valued because they have the right tools for the job, but then also make them able to do their job better because they have the tools, again, to do their job.
What I love about what you're saying too is, especially thinking about maybe it's your first or second time in the world of work, you might not know what to ask for. So if your employer or your company says, hey, these are some of the more commonly requested things, here's what we have available, it can make that barrier to getting what you need so much lower. And it might even spark an idea of how you can get what you need, but not necessarily know how to ask for it.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think that this is where most companies will want it to be a very independent process and personalized process, and that makes a lot of sense. We want to make sure that we're not creating unnecessary tools that may cost money to the company that might be unreasonable, right, over time at scale. So instead, looking at some of the most common things can be a really great starting place for both employees and employers to agree on here's things that people often need.
All right. True or false? This is a little bit of a myth buster.
Okay, I'm ready.
But are accommodations or those workplace adjustments, are they often prohibitively expensive?
No, most accommodations are free, actually. And if they do cost money, usually they cost $500 or less. The Department of Labor puts out statistics on this. It's been really helpful and an often really large misconception by a lot of employers that accommodations will always cost large sums of money. We also see that people are more productive by implementing this, like we mentioned. But let me give you an example of a bad accommodation process.
I'm ready.
So very often the accommodation process by a larger company especially is handled by a specific team, right? And this team can live in a number of different areas. Maybe it lives within the human resources division somewhere. And oftentimes companies will have a portal that you have to log into that you can then access accommodations, and it sends a little form request to a specific team or division. We've seen in the past companies that we've worked with not know where that email goes to, right? And it can take some time before you get a response or an answer. Now, this is obviously problematic. And so we think that people should have some patience in how they go about requesting those accommodations, knowing that there's not always a straightforward way to access this. But we also want to challenge that because we want companies to invest more time and energy into knowing what their own process for handling accommodation requests are. Because again, if people have the tools to do their job, they're going to do the job a lot better.
I think it's so interesting that when we think about accommodations, or even sometimes when a job seeker thinks about accommodations, it's at that point of entry of a careers page, right? On the website, it might say email accommodations at insert company name here if you have any accommodation requests to complete the application. Do you have any examples of either best case or maybe not so great cases where that has happened and what we maybe recommend doing instead?
Yes, love that question. So if any of our listeners are working in an HR team or working for a larger organization, go to your careers page, look at where Krista had mentioned you would request an accommodation in the interview process especially. Most of the time, it is an email address that says accessibility or accommodations at company name. And that person, the candidate, will fill out that email address. They'll send it away, and it goes somewhere. It goes into the depths of a larger company, and someone will respond. They are mandated to do that in the U.S. under the ADA, in other countries under different laws that mandate those accommodation processes. Now, that's good. We want that to happen. But in the application process, this triggers a problem because the time it takes for that email to go to unknown person or team and then understand what the concept and the context of the accommodation request is, and then make it way back to both the candidate, the hiring team, any recruiters or talent acquisition professionals involved, that eats up time. Even just saying that ate up a lot of time, right? So what we've seen as the best practice that's starting to emerge is a form that candidates can fill out. And there are many good examples of companies out there who have started to implement this form where a candidate in the application process can say, here's my name, here's the job requisition number that I'm applying for, and here's what I would like access to. That allows that timeline to be sped up dramatically. So because most of the time on the company side, if they get that email, they're going to first be like, okay, which job are you applying to? Is that job even still open?
Right.
Did they hire someone? And then try to figure out how to implement it. You get all the information all at once. So we're encouraging our partners and our companies to move towards that implementation of an accommodation process in the application. But it takes some time and some understanding of that issue.
Yeah.
But I want to highlight, sorry, I'm talking a lot. I want to highlight that I think that companies lose out on a lot of talent when you don't have an easy accommodation process in the application process for a candidate. If someone can't access the tools to do the job or to show how they can do the job in the interview, they're not going to be brought into the company.
Right. And you're spot on there. I do think that oftentimes, whether it's the speed or the timing of the process, or just not necessarily knowing how to navigate the process. And to be fair, some accommodations absolutely take time and they take coordination of services. I know in some of my previous roles, I often had to coordinate ASL interpreters, and those absolutely take time because there's not always a bulk of readily available interpreters. But other accommodations can be maybe put forward proactively or a bit on demand. Like, I want live captions during a video interview. And I think that we're seeing more and more companies take a step towards offering those workplace adjustments regardless of diagnosis, because it can make a candidate perform better or have more confidence as they proceed in the interview.
100%. And one of the most common requests that we get in the neurodiversity space is for the questions in advance. Now, this can be a challenge for companies to implement, but it is possible, and I think it's reasonable. That term reasonable is a part of the accommodation conversation, because in the ADA here in the US, it mandates that reasonable accommodations be implemented. And I think that questions in advance of a job interview can be really helpful. And for neurodivergent talent, that helps prepare mentally on what's going to be expected of that person, and also the opportunity for them to kind of gather their thoughts and put forward a skills-based presentation towards the interviewing team. Instead, when we don't have questions in advance, someone who is neurodivergent might react with a lot of anxiety for a question and not able to adequately show their skills in the way that the manager wants, right? And so it is an easy implementation. But on the company side, it doesn't take a whole lot. It might be a PDF with a little explainer saying, here's how we recommend you, manager or hiring team, create the questions in advance.
Right. And you're spot on there. Even giving that in advance can decrease social anxiety, but it also, which I think is a benefit on the company side, it ensures consistency through the process, where maybe in a different episode, you'll hear more about interviewing by vibes. So we can get away from the interviewing on vibes side of the house and really focus more on that skill-based hiring or the consistency in our hiring processes.
100%. I mean, I've seen so many interviews that we've facilitated over the years where the managers, the hiring team walking into the interview had zero plan for what they were going to interview on. Now, they won't tell you that, but we know that this is a frequent occurrence, not just for large companies that we're working with or any of our partners. Like, this happens everywhere.
Right.
Every single hiring manager does not always have a fully baked plan. We want to challenge that. We want to say, if you're going to compare people, if you're going to evaluate who should join your team, you should have a plan for how you're going to make that evaluation. Would make sense.
Yeah. I mean, we ask for evaluation criteria in all aspects of our job. So starting with hiring seems to make sense.
Yeah.
Which brings me to another question I want to ask you is, where do we see maybe this accommodation or adjustment conversation happen, not just in hiring? Where else might we see it? Is it something that might occur 6 months, a year, 2 years into someone's role?
100%. I mean, if you think about I'll tell a quick story. If I'm trying to do a home improvement project, the amount of times that I go back and forth to the hardware store because I need another tool or material is absurd. I mean, it takes a while for me to understand what I need, right?
I'm so curious what home improvement projects you have at your house.
That's another conversation. Lots of home improvement projects. But yeah, so we need time to understand what's needed. And being in the role and in the job helps you to understand what tools you need to better do that job. Because in any circumstance, it takes a while for you to gather yourself, to understand your surroundings and know, hey, if I had this, I'd be a lot more productive. Mm-hmm. Another really common example in the neurodivergent space is change of desk location. Mm-hmm. Really simple to implement, but it takes some time. Someone's not going to say right away, oh, that desk doesn't work for me, right? Don't put me there. But maybe over the course of 4, 5, 6 months, they notice that the smells from the kitchen start to overwhelm and distract them all day. Right. Or maybe it's the traffic pattern that people keep walking by that desk are really disruptive. And if your concentration is locked onto something and keeps locking onto something else, that can be not productive to your best version of your work self, right? So changing that would be really helpful. And it's a good accommodation and easy accommodation process to make.
This has been so helpful for anybody who maybe is listening in today who hasn't necessarily started on their accommodations or adjustments journey. Where would you recommend someone get started?
One, A lot of companies have done great work. We often get into here's how you can improve, but so many companies already have some great accessibility standards, and very often they are underutilized. So first, look at what accessibility standards exist within your company and take stock of it. Second, look for the improvements, the tools to do your job better, the accommodations for your accommodations. Suggest to the accommodations teams what things you think would be a common request and help them figure out how to implement it. We see employee resource groups being really helpful in these conversations, helping to gather, hey, what would be better to do your job? Those can be really helpful places to turn. And then places like us, Neurodiversity in the Workplace, that's what we do. We do help companies understand which accommodations and accessibility standards they should be implementing that would unlock more of the workforce, enable more people to do their jobs better, and it's a good thing all around.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe. This has been super informative.
Thank you.